Good morning. Thank you all for joining us. We want to welcome you all to our October webinar with the Kentucky Advising Academy. As you all know, we are an initiative of the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education, and we are excited that you are joining us today and hope you can get some information that you can put to immediate use. I am Mitzi Holland, and I'm the director of the Kentucky Advising Academy, and I have with us today our regional coordinators. And we also have a special guest, Dr. Aaron Huey, who is a distinguished professor at Western Kentucky University. And we're excited to hear and learn from Dr. Huey today. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our KAA host, Cheryl Brumley.
Hello, everyone. And as Mitzi said, welcome. As we're joining in, if you could go ahead and pop your name and title in the chat, just to introduce yourself and let us know kind of who's in the room. Some of you might be familiar with that, but today we're just going to do the name and the organization and title, if you can. On our agenda today is a brief, we're going to introduce KAA for anyone joining us that maybe hasn't been involved in any of our offerings before. And then we're going to pass it off to our guest who's going to talk about creating those partnerships for career exploration and awareness. And that is Dr. Aaron Huey joining us today. And then we're going to give you information on how you can stay connected with the Kentucky Advising Academy. And that ELA evaluation for us today. So some of you might be familiar with the Kentucky Advising Academy purpose. We exist to provide support to Kentucky educators in providing students equitable access to post-secondary advising. And we do this in a number of ways. One of those is the webinar that you're here on today. We also have our Well-Advised podcast, as well as professional learning events all across the state, and our online toolkit, which will share information on how to stay connected with that later. To accomplish all that we offer, we do have our regional advising coordinators and our director, who you were introduced to at the start, Mitzi Holland. And we would certainly love to have you join us in any and all opportunities. And like I said, we'll let you know how to be connected with that at the end of our webinar today. So with that, I am going to pass it off to our guest today. With us, Counseling and Student Affairs Department at Western Kentucky University, we have Dr. Aaron Huey. Thank you so much for being with us today. And Dr. Huey, if you want to take over control of the presentation.
That always sounds ominous, but thank you. Yeah, let me, okay. Here, I'm going to assume that somebody showed me a little trick about hide this. Okay. I'm assuming everybody can see me okay there. So, a little bit about what I'm going to talk about. Let me get my technology going here. Okay. I've known Mitzi Holland for years and years. I first met her when she took one of my classes a decade or two ago, so I really appreciate her when she asked me to do this. So we have got a lot of information to cover in a relatively short period of time. So I did want to kind of jump into this a little bit and welcome. Hopefully we're going to provide you with some information you'll find useful. You can find useful right away. I've been in the business of trying to help people try to figure out what they want to do with their lives and careers for a long time. And I'm also one of those folks that always believes it's about relationships. So we're going to talk about that a little bit here today. So thank you for being here. I like this quote from Deepak Chopra. I'm a quote person. Some of you may be able to relate to that. I think a lot of students experience this on some of them on a daily basis. There's this idea that there's a right answer out there and we just got to figure out what it is, because if we don't come up with the right answer, and we're talking about some pretty big things here, what do I want to do with my life? And sometimes people have this idea that once they make a decision, they're going to be locked in. And so you folks are really on the front lines of helping people navigate and negotiate the kind of things, the kind of decisions that they're going to be making. So first, the bad news. I am one of those good news, bad news people. You know, in fact, to reflect on this, which of the following statements sounds as though it could be made by your student, one of your students today? Have no idea what I want to do. I'm just interested in everything. I can't narrow it down. I have some idea, but I'm not sure. But I want to do this, but everybody else thinks I should do that. And so, you know, I don't know what to do. it's paralysis by analysis with a lot of students that I deal with. Now, I work a lot with graduate students, but I also work a lot with undergraduate students. I work a lot in the high schools. My oldest son, works for the TRIO program, so he does a lot of outreach to high schools and those types of things. So let's talk about, still under that category of the bad news, let's talk about some mistakes that students make, when they are choosing a major or deciding what they want to do with their life in general. Now, the presentation is not just going to be about those students who want to go to college, because college is an option. It's not the only option out there. I'm a firm believer that everyone should plan on extending their education beyond high school in some way, shape, or form. But there's a lot of options out there for that. But you'll recognize some of these mistakes. I've made some of these mistakes. Probably you've made some of these mistakes. Basing everything on income, I've seen some people be really happy with this. I've seen some of the most miserable people I've ever worked with that made decisions based on how much money they were going to be making and not whether or not they actually enjoyed what they were going to be doing in that position. So, letting authority figures influence them too much, tell them what to do. There are some indications that some of today's generation, and I don't want to get into the generational thing, the stereotyping and that, but that they do want, there are some members of the current generation coming up through our school system that want people to tell them what to do, which is kind of interesting, but let them influence too much, trying to find your passion. I tell students all the time, you need to find something you're passionate about, but that doesn't need to drive all of your decision making. I could have been very passionate about wanting to be an astronaut, probably not going to happen. So, you got to find something in fact, I was a biology major as an undergrad. I had every intention of being a high school science teacher. Funny how things work out. Failing to do your due diligence, do your homework. One of the things I'm always telling our students is you need to look into this. You need to spend some time there. Go spend a day, job shadowing, not getting experience as soon as possible. So that, I always accuse my undergraduate institution of putting student teaching at the very end of my program, because once you figured out you might not want to do this, it was almost too late. The student teaching was the last thing you did before graduation. So it's kind of bad to find out, this is not what you thought it was going to be at the last minute. Following their friends, well, everybody seems to be going in this direction. I guess I'll go in that direction too. Focusing too much, well, I've already spent so much time and effort on this major, I might as well see it through and get a degree in it. This is a big one for a lot of students. College is expensive these days. A lot of options beyond high school are expensive, but people get into this mindset, I've already invested so much in this, I probably need to see it through. A lot of students have told I was advised to double major because it will make me more marketable. Well, you need to dig into that a little bit and find out exactly what that means. We have a lot of majors on my campus that the faculty will tell you can do anything with this degree. Well, technically that's true of most degrees, but students want to know exactly what they can do with it. Waiting too long to choose, you got to find that sweet spot. I believe it's wrong to expect 18, 19-year-olds to decide what they want to do, right then, and it's going to stick to it the rest of their life. But sometimes people will wait too long, before they make a decision about things. And then this is a big one that's been around for decades. People will see how a particular occupation is portrayed on TV and the media, and they'll think, I want to do that because that looks like kind of cool and glamorous. And I've had several students over the years that tell me they want to go to law school because they watched a lot of NCI and all this kind of stuff in Law and Order, and that looks like it'd be a fun job. Well, I tell them, if you want to be a lawyer, what I want you to do is this Saturday, instead of doing what you normally do, go to the library here and just read all day long, because that's basically what you're going to be doing. Those moments you see in the courtroom are going to be few and far between. So don't have this romanticized image of things. So now the good news. What do I want to do? What we're here today, as I understand it, and you can blame me if I didn't get this exactly right, but we're trying to help our students. That's all we're here to do. We're trying to help them decide what they want to do, make informed decisions about things. A student that doesn't know what they want to do, they're in high school, they're coming out of high school, they may lack the information about himself, herself, may not be comfortable with the decision-making process, may be very conflicted about some things, may be afraid to commit. I work with a lot of graduate students that it's really hard for them to commit to something. Feel there's no rush and take more time to explore. That's some truth to that. May equate a major with a career, which is which is not accurate, may be apathetic about the college experience. Uh, everybody always asks, you've always been asked this, what's your major? What are you going to go into? And everybody has an opinion about it. Sometimes people don't know what they want to do, and so they take a lot of general education classes, or they take a year off, or they do other things. But there's a lot of things that come into this whole idea of college. So I wanted to mention that first. If you're an undecided, you're in good company. You got a lot of folks that are undecided. Even those people who've declared majors are sometimes still undecided. We have a lot of issues with transfer students too. And that falls on us sometimes to make sure everything is fluid and seamless and those types of things. College does offer the opportunity to explore, to find out who you are, and to find out more about the world of work. I always like to tell students you're not alone if you're not sure what you want to do. Take advantage of your general education electives and kind of go in that direction. And again, a college campus is going to be one of the most diverse places that a lot of students ever going to be exposed to. It certainly was in my case, and so I use that to kind of my advantage. So things we want to remind students that are thinking about going to college is step back, take a breath. A lot of students have a lot of anxiety. They start to thinking about how much loans they're taking out and how much this is costing, and they don't want to let people down. And it's real easy for you or I to sit here and go, well, you just need to step outside your comfort zone. Well, I'm assuming most of us that are attending the webinar today, we've had a little experience with this, and so we know kind of how to do that. A lot of students don't. It's kind of like if you tell somebody they need to be more assertive, well, that may be true, and they probably know that, but they don't. If you don't tell them how to be more assertive, you're not really helping them that much. So, I believe in being positive and encouraging, but also being realistic. Sometimes it's not always fun to step outside your comfort zone, but I think it's a real educational process for people to do that. I always like to remind, I was a first-generation college student. We've got a lot of first-generation college students on our campus today. In fact, we've started to recognize more of the unique needs that they have. So, this is sometimes one of the most challenging populations to work with because they don't have that frame of reference. If your parents went to college, or you had a sibling that went to college, you've got some insight into that experience. But if you're the first, my parents essentially knew that I was at college. I had no pressure to major in anything because they didn't know enough about it to give me that advice. I had friends who, in some cases, their parents had told them, well, if you don't major in this, we're not going to support you, which put them under a great deal of stress and pressure and those types of things. We all want our kids to do well. I want my two boys to do well. But sometimes we have a hard time drawing the line where it's our decision versus their decision about things. So if you're advising, somebody that's undecided, and again, it could be college, it could be high school, it could be middle school, some things that we need to be aware of. If you're trying to figure out what you want to do, what's going to be the next chapter in your life after high school, there's some things that we all need to focus on. Self-knowledge is always going to be important, knowing yourself really well. Some people do, some people don't. When I was 18, I was still trying to figure out who I was. Educational knowledge, I have a general idea what I wanted to do. I had no idea how to get there. Occupational knowledge. One of the things that academic advisors really have to do, if you're an academic advisor, some of you know this, you could do testimonials on it. You're a personal counselor sometimes. I'm not saying you're doing therapy. My counseling colleagues get upset when I use the word counseling sometimes, but you are a counselor. You're there, you start doing academic advising, career counseling, you end up in personal counseling. Your personal life affects your work life and your relationships and those types of things, but you do have to know a lot about the world of work, and that's constantly evolving. I always found it kind of disheartening when somebody said, well, we're preparing you for jobs that don't even exist yet. There's some truth to that. That's not real reassuring to a lot of students today. And then students need to know how to make decisions about things. And sometimes we forget this is all kind of new to them as far as making decisions. So I thought I would get you involved a little bit here. So we're going to take the time management personality profile. Now this is for your benefit, but I also want you to take what we kind of, the idea, the concept here, and kind of apply it to as you work with your students. So I believe Mitzi and Cheryl should have sent out a couple of handouts. One of them looks like this. So if you did have a chance to print that out, please pull that out now. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a series of questions up on the screen, and you're going to put your responses on this sheet that looks like the sheet here. Again, you should have two sheets, and we'll get to the other one here in a minute. For example, question 1, put your response to question 1 there, then 2, 3, 4, 5. It reads across the page, then back up to the top. I'm not trying to insult your intelligence, but I've done this before where somebody starts recording their answers 1, 6, 11, which makes it kind of interesting. But again, what you're going to do is you're going to answer these questions using this scale. All the questions are going to have the same scale. 4 means almost always. That is you to a T. 1 means almost never. That's not really me. That doesn't really apply to me. I don't do that. So for example, first question, think about yourself. Now we're going to go through these relatively quickly because of the time that we're working under here today. But I did want to give you a time to at least reflect on this just a little bit. So for example, first question, how would you rate yourself? 4, 3, 2, or 1, and this is just how you see yourself. So is that you or is that not you? Can you make decisions about minor details without needing to know how the overall plan is coming together? Again, rate yourself. People that are successful know themselves really well. They also know how they come across to other people. So we'll talk about that. Number 3, do you know where can you find most of your important papers? Do you know where they're at? I'm one of those folks that I know basically where everything is at. I have a lot of I had a lot of weaknesses, but being organized is usually not one of them. So do you know where you filed most of your important papers? Could you lay your hands on the deed to your house, for example, if you had to? A busy environment helps me to work more efficiently. I've said people kind of brag about that. Yeah, I like when things are happening. I like a busy environment. Some people don't. Some people it gets on their nerves. Some people loved working from home during the pandemic because they were in their element. Some folks couldn't stand it because they needed to be at a place where stuff was happening. Do you find yourself inundated with papers that you have to get to? Do you never seem to get caught up about all your paperwork and those types of things? Do you get distracted by the unimportant while you're in the middle of something that's important? Now, the good thing about doing this by Zoom is nobody's there looking over your shoulder and seeing what you put for all these things, so you can hopefully be completely honest about it. Kind of remind my students about that. But just rate yourself. And so in a couple of seconds, I'm going to move on to the next page. So last chance to give yourself a rating on 1 through 6. Okay. If a party is being planned, I enjoy attending to the particulars more than I do planning the theme. Are you more of a detail-oriented person? Are you more of a big picture person? You know yourself. You know which one you enjoy more. Do you keep your to-do list handy? I've always been a to-do list person. I have Post-it notes all over my desk and to-do lists and reminders and everything. Some people don't. You tend to take on several tasks at one time. A lot of people in education, in particular, we don't like to say no, so we end up being overextended, and the only person we should probably be upset with is ourselves because we don't like to say no. But are you comfortable taking on several tasks at the same time? Do you find yourself losing sight of long-term goals when dealing with short-term crises? Some of you probably work in situations where you're just putting out fires all day long, and you don't have time to think about, the big picture in the long term. But it's easier for some folks than others. Do you find yourself daydreaming during meetings or discussions? Guilty as charged, and as I've gotten a little bit older, I've noticed this happens more and more because I find myself a sense of deja vu most of the meetings I'm in. I'm good at mapping out the steps needed to complete a project. Our students do a lot of group work here. And it's always good if one of them is good at that, because a lot of people are idea people. They're not good at actually execution or mapping out exactly what steps are. Some of you think that way. Yeah. Telephone and fax numbers, and don't laugh. Our printer here, which is also a fax machine, we get about 3 faxes a day from various folks. So we think it's an outdated technology, but there's a lot of folks out there, particularly in the business world, that are still using the technology. Not everything is DocuSign. But, you know, could you lay your hands on those things pretty quickly? When you're working on one project, now again, think about yourself. Do ideas about other projects kind of come to mind when you're working on one thing? Some people focus totally on the thing they're working on. Some people, their mind is kind of always working. So another couple of seconds, and we'll move on to the next page. So give yourself a rating for each one of those. Okay. You put off making decisions until a situation becomes urgent. That's why I said you can be honest. It's just you there. You only make a decision when you have to. Your mind wanders when you're working alone. Think about I'm in the office right now with the door shut, sign on the door saying, you know, I'm doing something important, leave me alone. So when I'm doing something like this, my mind hopefully stays kind of focused, but when it's just me in here, my mind does tend to wander a little bit. In the midst of working on a project, attending to minor details as they come up, does that help you stay on track? You have to think about that one for a minute. When you're working on a project, do you deal with things as they come up, or do you make a mental note that I need to come back to that when I get, you know, at the appropriate time? Are you uncomfortable when your desk is overcrowded with papers? I'm kind of in the middle on that one. It bothers me when I see somebody whose desk is just a pile of stuff. It also bothers me when it's too clean or too organized. We all have different thresholds when it comes to that one. Are you eager to start a new project even before you finish an existing project? Think about yourself. Think about how you work. Can't wait to get to the next one. Do you prepare for things at the last minute? Now, when you're hit with something at the last minute, we're not really talking about that, but in general, graduate students are bad about this. Well, they've known about the paper for 3 months, but they've still got the night before, so everything is okay. Interruptions throughout the day affect the amount of work I'm able to accomplish. Now, be honest. Some people don't mind interruptions. Some people do. Some people don't mind interruptions when they're not doing anything important. If I'm doing something important, I don't like it when my colleagues wander in here with a cup of coffee and tell me to take a break. First thing I think of, you must not have enough to do. Are you very precise about how you handle projects? As my grandmother would say, are you particular? Are you hard to work with because that perfectionism you tend to have? Do you keep track of all your important deadlines? I don't know if you can see this, I'm still using a paper planner, which I put all my deadlines, and I glance at it multiple times during the day. A lot of people don't. When you talk on the phone during a casual conversation, do you also do other things? When you're talking, can you also multitask? Back in the day, remember those phones that we used to have before there were cell phones and had the really long cords on them? When I was growing up in the 60s, my mother had one of those in the kitchen. She could actually pull that phone to any room in the house. The cord on it was so long, but she would do all kinds of stuff when she was talking on the phone. I'm not that way. Okay. 25, do you avoid delegating work until it's absolutely necessary? Well, nobody can do it as good as me, so I'm going to have to do it. Or I've worked with a few folks that they delegate everything to the point of we're not really sure what they do. Everybody else is doing their stuff. Do you have scraps of paper scattered about with bits of information on them? If this is you, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I do have scraps of paper. In fact, I thought Post-it notes were the greatest thing in the world because they had that sticky thing on them. I was posting notes around before we had that, and I was using tape. So again, Nobel Prize, sticky notes. Okay. Do you go home with your desk in order? I just can't leave here until I've gotten to a certain point and things are kind of in order. I don't want to come in and see this in the morning. And some people will stay 30 minutes extra just to do that. Do you keep your legal and accounting records up to date and in order? Or does it only become an issue when it has to be? During a business phone conversation, I would rather look for a related file while I'm talking than put the person on hold. Now, again, think about your behavior. Somebody asks you if you have a certain file or a certain document. Well, let me put you on hold for a minute and try to find that, or do you just keep talking to them as you're looking for it? Do you find it difficult to make time for the unexpected? Can you be interrupted without the person who interrupts you thinking they've just destroyed your whole day? Do you put off today what you can do tomorrow? Again, be honest. It's important to capture specific details of business conversation and record them verbatim. I know people that have notebooks everywhere, and they're always writing down in quotation marks what somebody said in case it ever comes up later if they're not outright recording the conversation. Do you object to meetings that start late? This is a pet peeve of mine. If I can be there, when the meeting starts, I just assume everybody should be able to too, and things do happen in the real world that make us late, but it bothers some people a lot more than it does others. If you're trying to find a street address while you're driving, would you rather leave the radio on than turn it off? Or whatever you listen to? Think about that one for a minute. Okay. Let you get your ratings in on that. We're almost done here, so hopefully you're still with me. Do you find yourself working long hours and never really being caught up? Now, some of this is outside your control. We live in a world where we expect long hours, and it's hard to get caught up. But you find yourself always in this situation. When you're at a meeting and someone brings up an interesting but unrelated topic, do you just kind of go with the flow? Or are you one of those folks that says, can we focus, people? We're never going to get out of this meeting if we don't stay focused on what it is. Some people, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just their mind goes in different directions all the time. Do you enjoy implementing the details of a project more than envisioning the end result? Do you like the work itself more so than the finished product? And some people, they almost get depressed when a project is done because they really enjoy doing it. Okay. Do you think that meetings that don't have an agenda are a waste of your time? Used to have a department head one time that never had an agenda. This was years ago. Never had an agenda. He actually had one, but he was the only one that knew. Nobody else in the room knew what we were going to talk about next. I came to the conclusion he did that on purpose because if we knew what we're going to be talking about, we could prepare for it. He didn't want us to prepare for it, If I'm walking around a shopping center looking for a particular store, are you comfortable chatting with a friend as you look? I've actually been in Opry Mills one time where we're trying to find a place, and I'm talking. The person goes, "Can you be quiet for just a minute? I'm trying to think. I'm trying to find where this place is," which had never occurred to me. You couldn't do two things at the same time. That was my bad. And you're disorganized basically because you just don't have the time to get organized. Excuse me. Now, again, I believe you're going to have access to this presentation, and I'll remind Mitzi and Cheryl later that I can actually send you this little assessment, not in the format that we just took it, but I'm trying to make this a little bit more interactive. So what you're going to do, hopefully you have ratings of yourself in all these different five categories, and this is what this instrument is designed to measure. So what you're going to do is add them up. So add up the ratings you gave yourself in that section 1, attention to task, so you get a total. Add up the ratings you gave yourself in section 2, type of focus, and so on. So you're going to have 5 totals. By the way, that generational thing that we were talking about before the webinar started, there was a time when in my classes I'd say, well, if you need to slip your shoes off, that'll be fine. By the way, today's students have no idea what you mean by that. And a student actually said to me one time, does Huey have a foot thing or something? No, my grandfather used to say that phrase all the time. If you're going to add something up, you need to take your shoes off, that's fine. You got to be careful these days about humor and even your references. Nobody gets anything that they used to get, I guess, when in my generation. But you're going to have 5 totals there. Add them up. And then what I want you to do, once you do that, pull out that second sheet that I believe you were sent when you registered for the webinar today. So you should have a second sheet there that talks about interpretation. So pull that out. And what you're going to do is you're going to kind of eyeball it. That first section there, attention to task, which is the total for section 1, attention to task, put a little dot on that line about where your total was. Again, you have to eyeball it a little bit, but if you were 22, you'd be just a little bit above 20 there, obviously. And then go on to the second one, put a little dot on that line where your total was. Go on to section 3, put a little dot on the line there. Then go on to section 4, style of processing, put a little dot. And then section 5, your strategy of action, put a little dot on that line. So when you get finished doing this, and again, if you need a little more time, you can do this in the background. We're going to move on here in just a minute. But you're kind of on your own schedule there. You're going to have a dot on each one of those lines. Last thing I want you to do is draw a line across the page. Connect the dot that you put for section 1, connect it to the dot for section 2, connect it to the dot for section 3, the dot for section 4, and then the dot for section 5. So you're going to have a line going across the page. Some of you are going to have maybe a flat line, kind of a straight line. Some of you are going to have some zigzags. Some of you may be low on one side, high in the middle, low on the other side. You can have any possible combination. This actually represents, in a way, sort of the way you think about things. This is the way you like to organize things, the way you like to see the world, what your priorities are, what it's going to take to make you happy. There's a lot of things we can infer from this. I've actually used this and with my students and groups. It can be used in marriage and family counseling, everything. It's not just an occupational thing. You know, if you understand how you see the world and how you think, you're going to be able to much better make better decisions about what you're going to be happy with and what you're not going to be happy with. Now, I've got some explanations on this that are included in the presentation, but again, Mitzi, Cheryl, just remind me and I'll send you this instrument that you can send out to folks so they want to use it. Again, this is kind of the adult version. This is not necessarily some of those questions. You have to have exposure to the world of work in order to understand what some of those things mean. And there's different versions of this that you can use with high school folks and those types of things. But if you're divergent, you seem kind of messy. You know, you're not the most organized person in the world, and that could be deceptive. You could be very highly organized, but it's according you have your own organization system. You know, I've known people that their whole life seems to be a pile of stuff, but if you ask them for something, they can reach into that pile and give you exactly what you've asked for, which means they're organized on some level. I've known people that looked like the most organized people in the world. If you're down on the convergent side, down near the bottom, you seem very organized. That can be a delusion. I've worked with people that seem like the most organized people in the world until you ask them for something and they can't find it. If you're a detail-oriented person, the devil's in the details. That's the way you think. When somebody gives you a task to do, you immediately start thinking how many steps it's going to take, how long it's going to take. That's just the way you think. If you're a global person, you tend to be a big picture person. You're an idea person. Obviously, what we're talking about here, some jobs you need detail-oriented people. Some jobs you need people that are good at thinking in the big picture and taking the tall view. Tight approach to structure, you like schedules and deadlines and Gantt charts, and you like milestones, and you like to map it all out before you do things. And you like, once you develop a plan, you like to stick to it. If you have a tight approach to structure, you like to do a lot of planning on the front end of things and then develop a plan and then stick to it. If you have a loose approach to structure, you don't really stick to plans that much. You know, you like to make it up as you go. If I ask you a tight approach to structure, do you think you can have that report to me by 9 o'clock on Friday? You'll say, you'll stop and think for a minute. You'll do that in your mind. You'll kind of count back. Yeah, I think so. If you're a loose approach to structure, you don't know. I'll let it be finished when I get it finished. I'm not sure. I'll do my best. If you're high on the parallel side, you're a multitasker. You're comfortable doing 7 things at the same time In fact, you like the variety. You like to work on one thing for 10, 15, 20 minutes, shift gears, work on something else, and then eventually shift gears, work on something else. Now, during the course of a day, for example, you will cycle through and get everything done. You just do it in kind of a piecemeal fashion. If you're a serial person at the bottom, you like to do one thing, finish it, or at least reach a stopping point before you move on to something else. You know, if I need your help with something, if I come to Mitzi and go, Mitzi, can you help me with this? If she's a parallel person, she'll drop whatever she's doing and say, yeah, what do you need? Let's go. If she's a serial person, she'll go, yeah, let me finish what I'm doing, and then I'll be right there. Okay, you know, you go ahead. I'll be there in a minute. She has to reach a stopping point. I'm kind of like that. And if you're reactive, you tend to be very good in a crisis situation. You tend to be very good at responding to problems after they occur. We need you. You know, contrary to what Stephen Covey sometimes says, we do need reactive people. You know, reactive people are good when time is of the essence. Proactive people are better at the preventative types of things. They're better at thinking things through. They're better at a proactive person is going to develop a system that's going to have less problems. In fact, the reactive person is dealing with the problem. The proactive person is thinking, okay, what do we need to change about this place that will lessen the likelihood this problem will occur again? And those are two different sets of skills. If you're going to work on the fire department, you need people with reactive skills that can think in the moment and deal with a situation as it occurs. You don't necessarily need proactive people who could come to your house and tell you as your house is on fire, you know, here's what you could have done to have prevented that. Let me tell you, you know, there's a time and a place for everything. So, you know, the last thing I want to say about this is that you're going to have a profile going across this page. There are a lot of occupations, and we don't have time to go into that here today, but I've got whole workshops we do on this where there are occupations that profiles, that they also have a profile as the type of thinking and the type of things that you need to do in that particular occupation, whether or not you go to college or not. And if your personality profile lines up with the profile for that particular occupation or career area, you're going to be more successful because you're going to think like the people in that profession think. And if it's not, for example, if you're low on the left-hand side, high in the middle, then low on the right-hand side, you're going to work best with people who have that same profile. You're going to have a hard time working with somebody who's high on the right-hand side, low in the middle, and high on the left-hand side because they think kind of the opposite of the way you do. And some of you see this in your work relationships now. There's people that you hire them and you've only worked with them for about a week and you're already completing their sentences. Chances are you've got a very similar profile on this. There's also people you've worked with for 10 years, you're still scratching your head. You know, I still don't know where they're coming from. There's a real good chance their profile is going to be opposite of yours on this. So, and also if you want to know whether or not you're going to move up, be promoted, the closer your profile is to the level right above you, which means if you're supervisor and your profile is about the same, the chances are you're going to have an advantage there if you apply for that job because you think the way those people do. Now, detail people like detail people. If you're a detail-oriented person, and I am too, I like you. I like the way you think. You've got your priorities right. Those global people make me nervous. They're always talking about the big picture and all this kind of stuff, and I'm not interested in that. So the closer your profile is to the level above you, the more likely it is that you're probably going to be seen favorably by the people that are in charge. And again, I've got some interpretations here. There's a lot more to this, but I did want to expose you to what I consider to be a pretty good instrument when it comes to helping people understand themselves and what their strengths and areas for improvement are, and also why they get along with other people or don't. When I do reference checks for any of my students who've applied for jobs, nobody asks me technical questions. They always ask me the same things. Do they work well with others? How do they take feedback? How do they take supervision? Can you give me an example of a time where they had a conflict with someone? How did they approach that? How did they confront the person? They want to know all about their people skills, and that's exactly what we're talking about here with most of these types of things. So a lot of information there. I'm hoping to be able to connect the dots. You can kind of see with yourself what you're good at, what you're not good at, the way you think. And then if you're unhappy in your current job, we may have some academic advisors who said, you know, I thought this was going to be something completely different than what I'm doing on a daily basis. One of the ways, you know, to think about that is, okay, what's kind of the profile that's expected of me in this position, and does that match my personality, my profile, or whatever? So I want to talk a little bit about, think about this for a minute. Again, this is a pretty good instrument. I've been using it for about 20 years in different contexts and business and industry. I do a lot of training with companies and agencies and those things. And I can always see the light bulb going off when people look at this and they start comparing their profiles with each other. And, oh, this is why we don't get along. So kind of connect the dots. All academic advisors have to be competent in using multiple strategies to help students. When I went to high school, only about 20% of my graduating class went to college. It was a select group, and so now a lot of times everybody's being advised to go to college, and which explains some of the economic problems we have. But we have to be really good at working with undecided students without rushing them to make a decision about things. And I like this bullet point too. Even with the best advising efforts, some students are not going to be able to make concrete decisions about their future. So we just have to stay with them. Some students are always going to be, labor intensive, and we can't give up on them. But we need to realize it's going to be a challenge for them. Some of this information, mandatory advising. This is a good idea. If somebody hasn't made a decision about things, make it a requirement they come in and talk. If they're thinking about going to college, there's some things they can do there. Written exercises are always good. We did kind of a version of that with the time management personality profile. Anytime somebody has to commit to writing what their goals are, it causes them to be more concrete about things. Your thinking becomes a lot less fuzzy when you actually put it down and can see it in the writing. So anytime you engage in written exercises, I've actually told students, well, I want you to give me a page on what your ideal life would look like. What would be your ideal career? And don't focus on the things you'd be doing. Focus on what would make you happy. And let's talk about that. There's a lot of programs out there that can help students to figure out what they want to do. Do they want to go to college? Do they want to go to trade school? Do they want to start their own business? Entrepreneurialism is very, 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 very rampant out there these days. A lot of my students have a side gig. They're working on things. Sometimes the side gig becomes more important than what their job they're actually doing. There's lots of ways we can find information about the world of work. Again, if you're an academic advisor, you need to know something about what their opportunities are going to be after they finish whatever program they choose to go into. We can be very good at recruiting folks. We can be very good at retaining folks. Until we get very good at helping them get placed in jobs, we're still not doing the job that we should be doing. Modeling opportunities. I'm a big believer in job shadowing. If you think you want to work in a particular area, go spend some time there in the actual environment. Don't listen to your professors who are going to tell you what it's like to work in that field. Go there, make an appointment. We can help them make contacts with those things. That's why most of the programs that I'm associated with, they all have internships and apprenticeships and practica. Those have grown over the last couple of decades for a very good reason. We got to build, support for the social network. Today's students, they live on their phones. You know this. They listen to their peers more than they listen to you. We need to at least understand what's going on with that dynamic if we're going to help people figure out what they want to do. I'm a big believer in appreciative advising. This is a whole model out there. Like we could do a whole day's workshop on this. But if you're going to advise undecided folks, and this is, again, not just students that are going to go to college, there's 6 phases here. And we could go into a lot of detail about each one of those, but I want to focus on the dream phase. This is one where you can actually help students clarify what they want to do and then point them in the right direction. In the dream phase, again, the different phases here, it's about the third one, listen purposely, make connections between the information and the discover phase. I always ask students about what's your favorite magazine, journal, question, even things you read online. When you were 8 years old, what did you say you wanted to be when you grew up? What about now? If salary, education, and time were irrelevant, what is your ideal job? People can give you tremendous insights here. And, once you do this for a while, get some experience, you can understand where they're coming from. I'm also a big believer. I still use the Discover program to work with folks to kind of figure out, there's versions of Discover out there, and you can, you'll notice some of the slides here have a URL at the bottom. That will allow you to go directly where that information came from. So I try to make it as easy as possible. So if you're interested in this, sometimes people don't associate these programs with anybody but high school students. Discover has programs that go down to grade 5. to help people figure out what they want to do with their lives. So if it's something you haven't thought about or you haven't thought about in a while, something you might want to look at, this is a very good website here that I've referred several students to over the years, the Virtual Job Shadow. Again, the URL is at the bottom of the slides. This will really help students who are going to, they can work on their own, but the idea being if you're an academic advisor that you're going to be working with them. You know, last thing I want to end up here is talking about if you're working with diverse populations of students, and we all do, some things you just need to keep in mind as as an academic advisor. Oh, one of the things that we did at Western that I thought was really good is about 5 or 6 years ago, we combined our academic advising with our Career Services Center. So now we have the Academic and Career Development Center. If you know anything about higher education, you know we love acronyms. So the ACDC Center, Academic and Career Development Center. So it's a really good move. The career counselors help people figure out what they want to do. The academic advisors then tell them how to get there. Some things you need to keep in mind in working with diverse students: you need to be accessible. Don't make assumptions about what they already know, understand. Always provide as much information as possible. Provide resources way beyond the academic stuff. Students need to know about the work environment, mental and physical health, social activities, dilemmas, family support. You know, we need to get our alumni more involved in these types of things because they're actually out there working in these areas and they can tell. Representation, very important that we understand who we're dealing with. You know, everything down to your office and everything else. We always need to accommodate faith-based observances. You know, decorate for the holidays. We've got to be sensitive to those types of things. You know, ensure that, you know, people feel comfortable in your setting, in your office. Particularly if you're trying to help somebody figure out what they want to do with their life, they should be comfortable in the place where you're doing it. There's a lot of, I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading this to you, but there's a lot of information on how to create a good advising climate. You know, everything starting with pronouncing people's names appropriately. It always bothers me if I mispronounce somebody's name. And names today are not like the names were when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s. Everybody has hyphens and you know, apostrophes and all this stuff, and it takes me a while just to figure out people's names, but I want to do it right. There's nothing that makes somebody feel more comfortable than if you can actually pronounce their name right. You know, communicate with students in the way that they prefer to be communicated. This is a challenge. You know, my boys, one of them's 25, one of them's 38, and neither one of them check their email. They all communicate in different ways. You know, we never want to pressure somebody to give information about themselves. We're there to be supportive and not to challenge or negate the experiences of our advisee. If somebody comes in and says, I feel very uncomfortable even being here, well, you shouldn't feel uncomfortable being here. Well, why do you feel uncomfortable here? You know, is there anything I'm doing that causes you to feel uncomfortable? I definitely don't want that to happen. We got to be very, you know, affirming and validating of our students. You know, and again, there's some information here. You can go back and look at this presentation after the fact. Everything down to just when you make a mistake or didn't tell somebody the right information, don't double down on it. Say, well, I'm sorry about that. Open-ended questions are always great. I'm a big believer in open-ended questions. Let them tell you what they're experiencing, what they're thinking, as opposed to, you know, having them rate it on a Likert scale. Again, I'm a quote person. Advising students who are undecided, and we're not just talking about, again, college students. A lot of high school students are undecided. A lot of junior high students are undecided. I'm one of those rare individuals that pretty much from first grade, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. Don't know why, but it's true. I didn't know exactly what I was going to teach, but I wanted to go in that direction. Some of my role models and people I admired were always teachers, and so that influenced my life early on. And education, neither one of my parents went to college, but they understood the importance of education. And so, you know, we need to recognize that they do have a challenge, and, you know, they may not be able to find anything that holds their interest. It's important to try new approaches and stay with our students to help them make better decisions going forward. The world's going to have a lot of needs going forward. Just watch the news these days. And so the more we can prepare people to do that, the better off we're going to be. That is a lot of information coming to you in a relatively short period of time. I realize that, but I did want to kind of open this up for anybody have any questions. And I think the best way to do this too is that Mitzi or Cheryl, if you see any things there that have any questions, you can just kind of relay those to me verbally, and let me know when you want me to kind of turn things back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Huey. We certainly appreciate all this great information. And I know that if people don't have questions now, I will say that if you do have a question, feel free to email us or Dr. Huey directly. And if you email us, we will get those questions to him and then share his response with everyone after the fact. So if you don't have a question right now, if you're still thinking and processing, that is totally fine.
Absolutely. The last thing I'll say is at the bottom of a lot of those slides are URLs. There's some resources, that I can send you, but that's my actual email address. Email me. I'm one of those people that I try to get back. I try to respond to every email I get, and I'll try to get back to you pretty quickly. So if you do have specific questions about anything, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll get back to you just as soon as I can. And again, Mitzi, I think I will send that personality instrument that you can send out to everybody if they want to use it for personal purposes or that kind of thing. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to do this, and you've invited me here today. So I think I want to give you time to do whatever you need to do at the end here. So let me switch this back. Let me stop sharing and kind of switch this back over to you, or however we do that. Okay, yeah, there we go.
All right. Thank you so much again. And you all, just like we mentioned earlier, and I'm fixing to turn it over to Cheryl, but you will get a copy of this presentation. And Cheryl will talk to you in a minute about how you can get your ELA certificate, but we will send you all of this information in an email soon. It'll either be today or tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Cheryl.
Thank you, Mitzi. And thank you, Aaron, for all of that wonderful information.
Thank you.
So we just want to take a moment, as we usually do, to kind of wrap us up and share some information about KAA. We want to make sure that everybody is aware of our College and Career Advising Toolkit. It was just released in the spring, and you can access it through the URL that you see there on the screen or the QR code. And this is an online resource that is designed to support all post-secondary advising systems and offer a comprehensive collection of tools, information, and resources to kind of serve as a hub for advisors across the Commonwealth. So this newly launched toolkit is aimed to help advisors gain a better understanding of the foundational elements to effectively advise high school students to and through their post-secondary transitions. So you as advisors can use the toolkit to gain more insight into topics such as career and academic advising, much like we discussed today, student development, student belonging, and much, much more. Each topic that is housed in our toolkit also offers some quick guide documents. And these are really great because they are curated to be able to be downloaded and shared with other practitioners, teachers in your building, students, or even family members and parents if you needed to. So we hope you take advantage of our toolkit that is now available. As we near the end of our time together, I'd also like to encourage you to stay connected with the Kentucky Advising Academy. We appreciate you being here today, but we also really want to see you with us in the future. So on the screen here, we are sharing our next month's webinar for November. That is going to be all about early post-secondary opportunities. We'll be hearing from our guest, Robin Hebert, and she'll be talking about all things EPSO and navigating those processes. Again, you can register now if you'd like through the QR code on the screen, or through our toolkit. The website is there on the bottom, and anything on the toolkit under Kentucky Advising Academy, if you click on webinars, you can always register for the upcoming webinar there, as well as look at our past webinars. Last but not least, to stay connected with KAA, you can always find up-to-date information on our website and on our toolkit, all of which is being sent in the chat. So all of these important links that you'll need that we've just mentioned, where you can subscribe to our communication updates, including updates about upcoming podcasts and webinars, as well as informational emails and in-person events. So if you want to keep up, please sign up. And at the bottom, if you go to our website, cpe.ky.gov/advisingkentucky, and scroll to the bottom, that's where you'll be able to sign up for our emails. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at AdvisingKY. And we also share about upcoming events and important information there. And last but not least, any of our past webinars, as I just mentioned, can be found on our toolkit and on YouTube, as well as our past podcasts. And those can be found by searching Kentucky Advising Academy on YouTube. Last but not least, we would love for you to complete our survey. This is a way for us to continue to improve our processes and our offerings at the Kentucky Advising Academy. And this is also how we'll process your ELA credit. So if you need the ELA credit, be sure you fill out this Google form by following the URL on the screen or the QR code. If you don't need ELA credit, we still very much appreciate your evaluation because, as I said, it helps us moving forward with our offerings and how we grow and continue to serve you, the advisors, as KAA. Again, this link is also being provided in the chat. And that is all that we have for you today. So thank you all for being here. We'll stay on for just a bit if there are any final questions. And if not, thank you guys for coming, and we'll hopefully see you next month.